The universe is not a quiet place. Oh, it has its silences, deep and terrible, in the voids between galaxies. But where life gathers, where civilizations rise like coral on the spires of suns, the universe is a chorus. A symphony of commerce, of communication, of ships threading the star lanes like golden needles weaving a tapestry of light. And then, there is the silence. Not a void, but a wall. A roiling, churning, eternal tempest of hyperdimensional forces, where the normal laws of physics go to die screaming. The Galactic Concord, an alliance of 17 starfaring species, called it the Vale of Moaning Stars. A poetic name for a place of pure, unadulterated terror. For 12 standard millennia, it had marked the absolute immutable border of the known galaxy. A storm so vast it blotted out entire clusters on the other side. So dense, sensor probes sent into its embrace returned as melted slag, if they returned at all. So chaotic, that the very concept of navigation within it was a joke. The Concord's greatest physicists, the crystalline logicians of Xylos, had modeled it 1,000 times. Their conclusion was a single elegant glyph that translated, essentially, to impassable. A natural law. The veil wasn't just a barrier. It was a doctrine. A foundational truth of galactic society. As sure as the veil stands, was a common saying. It represented the ultimate limit. The edge of the map. The end of ambition. On the Concord side of the veil, life was orderly, ancient, and comfortable. The member species knew each other, their territories, their protocols. The gel-lent, massive, stoic crustacean-like beings were the engineers and miners. The avian, ethereal serene were the artists and diplomats. The cybernetically enhanced, four-armed Cthari were the merchants and archivists. And the Xylosian logicians, beings of shimmering geometric crystal, were the arbiters of truth and science. They had long ago accepted their beautiful, bounded universe. There was peace. There was prosperity. And there was, though none would ever admit it aloud, a certain stagnation. This is the galaxy humanity found when our first FTL ship, the UNSS Odyssey, sputtered out of a jump, reactors bleeding radiation, its hull scarred by an encounter with a gravity well the star chart said shouldn't exist. We were not conquerors. We were not glorious explorers. We were refugees from a dying Earth, limping into the light of a foreign sun, desperate and half-starved. The Concord observed us with polite, distant pity. They saw a young, fragile bipedal species with a shockingly reckless approach to risk and a terrifyingly short lifespan. They gave us a marginal, resource-poor system on the very fringe of known space, a place they called Sanctuary 37. To them, it was an act of immense charity. To us, it was a beachhead, a place to breathe. And from our new home, on the clear, cold nights, we looked up. Every other species in the Concord saw the beautiful spiral of the Milky Way. We saw that, too. But dominating our entire southern sky, like a bruised and angry god, was the veil. A perpetual, shimmering aurora of lethal energy, casting our world in an eerie, shifting light. They told us it was a wall. A death sentence for anything that entered. Humanity, for the first time in generations, heard a word we understood in our bones. Challenge. The Concord's outpost overlooking the veil was called Observation Prime. It was a Xylosian-designed marvel of elegant sterile architecture, all sweeping curves and silent halls, built into an asteroid that hung like a watching eye before the storm. Its commander was a serene named Chorus Kalen. With feathers the color of polished bronze and eyes that held the calm of centuries, Kalen was the embodiment of Concord philosophy, patient, observant, resigned to the natural order. His second was a young Cthari logistics officer, Vri, who wore her cybernetic interfaces like jewelry and had a merchant's keen eye for inefficiency. The head of the science contingent was a Xylosian logician designated Prime Calculus. It communicated via harmonic tones that translated into painfully precise language. For decades, Observation Prime's duty was a quiet one. Catalog minor energy fluctuations. Update the Impassable theorem with redundant data. Occasionally, rescue a foolhardy prospector or a grief-stricken individual who thought flying into the veil was a poetic way to die. They'd tractored in the wreckage of many such ships, their hulls etched with strange non-Euclidean scarring. Then the humans of Sanctuary 37 arrived. And the quiet ended. First, it was the sensor probes. Concord probes were masterworks of durable, single-purpose engineering. They would approach the veil's threshold, gather data from a safe distance, and return. Human probes were different. They were cheap, mass-produced, and launched in swarms. Dozens would arrow into the Veil's fringe. Most would be obliterated in microseconds. One or two might survive for a few seconds longer, screaming back a torrent of chaotic, useless data before dying. Prime Calculus reviewed the human data streams. Its crystalline form pulsed with a dismissive lavender light. Pattern, recursive loss of assets. Data return, noise superimposed on entropy. Conclusion, wasteful. Illogical. A violation of resource management principles. Chorus Kalen agreed. He sent a diplomatically worded missive to the human liaison on Sanctuary 37, suggesting that their energetic efforts were causing unnecessary sensor clutter and perhaps they might focus on more productive endeavors, like asteroid mining. The human response was a politely worded apology, and the launch of another larger probe swarm the next day. Then came the ships. Not to enter the Veil, but to dance along its edge. The Concorde used gravity tethers and calculated microjumps to maintain a safe, stable distance. Human vessels, small, angular things with bulky, retrofitted engines, would approach using raw thrust. They'd ride the bow shocks of electromagnetic waves, skimming the ionized particle winds like ancient surfers on a tsunami. The Concorde watched aghast as a human corvette, the Daring Leap, performed a braking burn within 2 kilometers of the visible energy front, riding its own exhaust plasma to avoid being sucked in. Vri reviewed the telemetry from the Daring Leap's near-disaster. Her secondary arms worked her console rapidly. Commander Kalen, their power-to-mass ratio is absurd. They have safety buffers operating at 3%. 3%. A Gel-Lent engineer would decommission a reactor at 15% degradation. They are improving by breaking things. Kalen's feathers ruffled slightly. They are children playing with fusion fire. They will learn, or they will burn. But they didn't burn. Not all of them. They learned. They adapted. Their ship designs began to change, influenced by the brutal lessons of the Veil's fringe. They became tougher, uglier, all sharp angles and reinforced girders, like boxers with broken noses. And then, the Navigators arrived. They didn't call themselves that, of course. To the Concorde, they were just more humans. But Observation Prime began to notice a pattern. Certain individuals would come to the outpost, or to the human run stations that now dotted nearby asteroids. They were of different ages, backgrounds, and specialties. But they all shared one trait: they would sit for hours, days, staring at the real-time feeds of the Veil. Not at the scientific data. At the visuals. Prime Calculus found one such human, a female designated Alara Vance, in a low-traffic observatory bay. She was a former pilot, her file said, grounded after a navigational error cost her ship's cargo. She was just watching. The logician approached, its form casting prismatic shards of light on the floor. Query: what is your function? This observational data is processed 17 times per cycle by superior synthetic intelligences. Alara didn't turn. Her eyes were fixed on the mesmerizing, catastrophic beauty of the storm. They're looking for patterns in the energy signatures. The magnetic flux. The particle density. Affirmative. These are the relevant variables. She finally glanced at the crystal being, a faint smile on her face. It was a strange expression, one that didn't reach her tired eyes. You're reading the notes. I'm listening to the music. Clarify, music is an auditory art form. This is visual and sensor-based phenomena. See that? She pointed to a region where tendrils of amber and violet plasma twisted around each other in a slow cosmic dance before violently repelling. That's a waltz. A brutal, 3-step waltz that repeats every 47 hours, 17 minutes. But watch the lead partner, the amber stream. See how it stutters? Just a microsecond hitch before the third beat? That's the key. The hitch is a documented quantum fluctuation. It is random. Is it? Alara asked softly, her gaze returning to the storm. My grandma used to say the sea has moods. Not just storms or calms, but personalities. A tide pool that would always have a crab in the north corner after a full moon. A current that would shift just so when a specific bird cried overhead. She was a fisherman's daughter. They called it superstition. until her boat was the only one that never got lost. Prime calculus processed this. It cross-referenced grandmother, fisherman, superstition, and navigation. The connections were anecdotal, illogical. It filed the interaction under cultural curiosity irrelevant. But Vri the Kthari was listening from the corridor. She understood profit, and she understood that humans, against all logic, kept finding profit in chaos. They were trading Veil fringe mineral data with Gellent mining cartels. They were selling extreme environment stress tests of their hull alloys. They were turning a place of sacred, terrifying finality into a business opportunity. It was disrespectful. It was chaotic. It was fascinating. The tension came to a head during a Concord Oversight Council, held via hologram in Observation Prime's atrium. Representatives of the major species were present. The human delegate from Sanctuary 37 was a man named Captain Anya Sharma, a former deep space reactor technician with a calm demeanor and eyes that held the same constant calculation as Vria's. The topic: the upcoming Great Transit, a once-in-a-millennium alignment where several key trade lanes would be at their most efficient. The proposed routes would require minor adjustments, shaving days off travel times. It was a complex but routine piece of galactic logistics. Then Captain Sharma spoke. Concord delegates, our analysis of the Veil's peripheral energy dynamics suggests a possibility. During the peak of the Great Transit alignment, the Veil's outermost layer, the region we call the shallows, will experience a 0.05% reduction in neutrino flux and a temporary stabilization of its subspace shear. A polite silence. The Xylosian delegate pulsed a cool blue. Acknowledged. This is within documented statistical noise. It does not alter the impassability theorem. It opens a window, Sharma said, her voice steady. A narrow, transient corridor. We believe a ship with the right course and timing could traverse the shallows. Not through the Veil, but using its energy gradients as a slingshot. It would cut the journey from the Gellent Foundry worlds to the Serene Core archives by 62%. The holographic chamber erupted in soft chitters, tonal pulses, and rustling feathers. It wasn't outrage. It was the sound of 17 ancient species hearing pure, unadulterated heresy. Chorus Kalan, presiding, spoke with strained patience. Captain Sharma, you propose to use the Veil, a monument to cosmic fury, the graveyard of 10,000 ships, as a shortcut. We propose to navigate it, Sharma corrected gently. Navigation implies a chartable medium, prime calculus intoned. The Veil is chaos. You are suggesting we sail a starship into a supernova. Vri watched, her data feed scrolling. The human math was compelling. Wild, based on 1,000 assumptions stacked like a house of cards, but internally consistent. They had modeled the chaos. They had given the storm a shape. The council rejected the proposal. Unanimously. It was, they declared, not just dangerous, but philosophically offensive. The Veil was a boundary. To try to cheat, it was to disrespect the natural order of the universe itself. Captain Sharma accepted the verdict with a nod. But as her hologram faded, she said one last thing. Her words aimed not at the council, but at the silent observers like Vri. A wall is only a wall until you find the door. Or make one. That night, in the human sector of Observation Prime, Vri used her security clearance to access the raw, unprocessed human data streams. She saw not just numbers, but the annotations. They had named the storms. The Maiden's Sigh. The Forge of Wills. The Grandfather's Pulse. They had mapped not just energy levels, but behaviors. They had turned an astrophysical phenomenon into a living, breathing entity with moods and patterns. And in the heart of the most terrifying tempest, a region. The logicians called Sector Null, the humans had scribbled a single handwritten note on their map, scanned and uploaded. It read, "The Eye of the Needle. Possible? Sounds like a dare." Vri felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. They weren't just studying the storm. They were courting it. The official rejection meant nothing. Humanity, as a Concord protectorate, was bound by Concord law. They would not send an official ship. But the human navigators, the pilots, the mathematicians, the dreamers like Alara Vance who saw music in the madness, were not an official armada. They were a subculture. A guild. A whisper network. A month after the Council's decision, a broadcast pinged across all open channels in the Sanctuary system. It was a simple, text-based manifesto. The Concord has a map. It says, "Here be dragons. We're going to go pet the dragons. Anyone who wants to come, bring your own scales. Rally point, Lazarus Rock. 1 week. No flags. Just ships." Lazarus Rock was a jagged asteroid deep in the Vale's gravitational shadow, a place only humans, with their reckless braking burns and tolerance for G-forces, could reliably reach. From Observation Prime, they watched through long-range scopes as ships began to gather. Not warships. Not exploration vessels. Freighters. Tugs. Refitted colony pods. A motley, ragtag fleet of maybe 24 vessels, each looking like it had been welded together from hope and spare parts. They called it Flotilla Improbable. The Concord was appalled. It was a mass suicide. A spectacle of barbarism. Chorus Kalen ordered all Concord assets to pull back to a safe distance and prepared the disaster recovery teams. Prime Calculus began composing a treatise on the evolutionary psychology of self-destructive impulses in short-lived mammalian species. Only Vri argued to get closer. "We must observe. The data will be unprecedented." "The data will be screams and then static," Kalen replied, his musical voice heavy. "We will observe from the mandated safety perimeter. That is final." But Vri had a Kthari's cunning and a merchant's disregard for pointless rules. She had a personal scout ship, a fast, nimble courier called the Mercurial Prophet. Officially, it was undergoing maintenance. Unofficially, she loaded it with every sensor she could borrow, steal, or justify, and slipped out of Observation Prime's docking bay during a shift change. She took up position behind a dense debris field, close enough to feel the static from the Vale crackle across her hull. Her sensors locked onto the Flotilla Improbable. There was no grand speech. No ceremonial countdown. The human ships just began to move. Not in a formation, but in a loose, flowing cluster. They were communicating on a tight beam laser network, invisible to her, but their movements were a language of their own. At their head was a ship she recognized. It was the Daring Leap, the corvette that had nearly been destroyed months before. Its hull was now a patchwork of new armor plates, and painted on its nose was a crude, beautiful mural, an old Earth sailing ship, riding a storm wave. And in its command seat, Vria's enhanced visuals confirmed, was Alara Vance, the grounded pilot. The flotilla approached the Vale's visible boundary, a crackling electric blue sheet of energy that seared the sensors. The Concord safety protocols screamed in Vria's mind. This was the point of no return. The human ships didn't slow. They accelerated. But not in a straight line. The Daring Leap banked hard, leading the flock not into the storm, but across its face, skimming the surface like a stone on a lake. The other ships followed, not in a line, but in a complex interweaving pattern. They were riding the shock waves of each other's engine wakes, using the micro-disturbances to adjust their course without wasting thrust. "They're dancing," Vri whispered to herself, her 4 hands gripping the controls. Then the Vale swallowed them. On Observation Prime, the main sensors showed only a catastrophic energy spike, then nothing. The official log would record, Flotilla Improbable. Presumed lost. 23 vessels. 187 souls. But Vri, hidden in the debris, saw a different story. Her illicit, high-gain arrays, tuned to weird human frequencies. Caught glimpses. Shattered, chaotic data fragments. She saw the Daring Leap vanish into a fold of violet plasma, and re-emerge 3,000 kilometers away, riding the crest of a gravitational wavelet like a surfer. She saw a lumbering freighter, the Titan's Bargain, caught in a sudden twist of spatial torque. Its hull groaned on the audio feed. Instead of fighting it, the pilot cut all engines. The ship was spun like a top, hurled sideways, and spat out into a calmer channel, its inertia scrubbed clean. A desperate, brilliant move. She saw 2 ships, a tug and a scout, caught in a converging energy shear. The shear would scissor them apart. Instead, they fired their dorsal thrusters at each other. The mutual blast pushed them just enough apart, the fiery kiss of their engines deflecting the killing energy blade by meters. It was not a brute force penetration. It was a conversation. A negotiation with chaos. They weren't fighting the storm's power, they were borrowing it, redirecting it, using its own insane violence to propel themselves forward. Ilara Vance's voice crackled once over a public channel Vree could barely parse, calm as a pilot announcing landing protocols. Mind the step at marker 7. It's a doozy. Grandfather's pulse is early today. He's cranky. They were using the names. They were predicting the unpredictable moods. 4 hours, Vree watched, her heart a drum in her chest. The flotilla was battered. One ship, a small courier, misjudged a turn and was enveloped in a helix of emerald fire. Its distress beacon lasted for 2 seconds. The humans didn't stop. They couldn't. In the storm, to stop was to die. They flew a funeral spiral around the last known coordinates, a fleeting moment of respect in the maelstrom, and then pressed on. They were deeper than any probe had ever gone. Deeper than the logicians thought possible for matter to remain coherent. Vria's sensors were overloading, painting a picture of a space that was less a volume and more a concept of violence. And then they reached it. Sectornal. The heart of darkness. On her screens, it was a solid impenetrable sphere of oscillating, multispectral annihilation. The eye of the needle. The flotilla gathered at its edge, a flock of battered birds before a mountain of lightning. This was it. The end of the line. Even the humans couldn't charm this dragon. A new signal came through, weak but clear. Ilara Vance, to all ships. All right, folks. This is it. The map ends here. From now on, we make it up. Remember the drill. Follow the leap's resonance signature. Don't think. Don't calculate. Just feel the beat. Feel the beat. Vree, a being of data and profit margins, felt a surge of alien disbelief. The daring leap didn't charge. It didn't dodge. It turned its nose directly at the heart of Sector Null and began to pulse its sublight engines. Not to thrust, but to create a rhythmic vibration. A beat. Thrum, thrum thrum, thrum. The other ships began to pulse in response, each on a slightly different harmonic. The cacophony should have been meaningless. But as Vree watched, something impossible happened. The chaotic surface of Sector Null shivered. It wasn't much. A slight smoothing along a single, specific frequency band. A resonance. The humans weren't trying to overpower the storm. They were singing to it. And the storm, this mindless cosmic engine of destruction, was answering. A filament of calm, no wider than a ship's hull, threaded its way through the sphere of fury. A temporary, acoustic tunnel. The needle's eye. One by one, the ships pulsed their way into the tunnel, vanishing into the core of the impassable storm. The daring leap went last. Vree saw its silhouette shrink, swallowed by the light, the mural of the old sailing ship the last thing to disappear. Silence. Vree held her breath. Her sensors showed nothing but overwhelming, homogeneous energy. A tomb. Then from the other side of Sector Null, a signal burst forth. Weak, triumphant, and clear. Flotilla improbable to all points. We are through. Repeat, we are through the veil. The storm is behind us. And the stars, gods, the stars, they're everywhere. Attached was a single low-resolution image. It showed the battered nose of the daring leap, the painted ship still visible. And through its viewport, a starfield unlike any in Concord charts. New constellations. The light of 100 billion suns that had been hidden for 100,000 years. The other side of the map. Vree sat back in her chair, her systems humming, her mind utterly, completely blank. The impossible had just become fact in front of her eyes. They hadn't just survived. They had listened their way through. She opened a channel to Observation Prime. Her voice, when she spoke, was stripped of all its merchant's cleverness, all its officer's formality. It was just raw, stunned awe. Commander Kalen, you need to see this. You need to see all of this. The theorem is wrong. The return of the flotilla improbable was not a victory parade. It was a limping, desperate stagger back into known space. Of the 23 ships that entered, 14 returned. The daring leap was more wreck than vessel, its hull blackened and fused in impossible patterns, but Ilara Vance brought it home on willpower and backup systems. They didn't emerge to cheers from the Concorde. They emerged to a stunned, disbelieving silence, followed by a frenzy of activity. The data was undeniable. The telemetry, the sensor logs from Vria's ship, the physical proof of their hulls, atomically altered by energies no Concorde ship had ever weathered. And the star charts. Oh, the star charts. Preliminary scans showed 10 potentially habitable worlds within a single jump of the exit point. Resource deposits that made the Gel-Lent Foundry worlds look like a backyard garden. And no signs of hostile prior claims. The Concorde Council was reconvened in emergency session. This time, Captain Anya Sharma was present in person, her uniform still smelling of ozone and scorched metal. Ilara Vance stood beside her, looking 10 years older and utterly serene. The chamber was a storm of its own. The Gel-Lent were calculating mineral yields. The Serene were composing epic poems about the journey. The Kthari were already drafting trade proposals. Only the Xylosian logicians were silent, their crystalline forms flickering in agitated, confused colors. Prime calculus floated forward. Its harmonic tones were strained, discordant. The data is verified. The transit occurred. However, the method, it is not navigation. It is aberrant resonance. A statistical fluke leveraged by organic pattern recognition bias. It is not a science. It is not repeatable. Ilara Vance spoke for the first time to the full council. Her voice was rough, but clear. You're right, Prime. It's not just science. She looked around at the assembled aliens, these ancient, wise, stagnant beings. You have equations for the storm's particles. We have a feel for its soul. You map the what. We learned the why. The grandfather's pulse isn't a random fluctuation. It's the echo of a black hole merger that happened a billion years ago on the other side of the veil. The maiden's sigh is the gravitational tide from a cluster of dark matter passing through a nebula. It's all connected. The storm isn't chaos. It's a story. The story of everything that's ever happened on the other side, screaming to be heard. She gestured, and a new map was displayed. Not a Concorde map of clean lines and shaded territories. This was a human map. It was a riot of color and motion, looking more like a painting of a hurricane than a navigational aid. Streams were labeled with names, not numbers. Danger zones were marked not with warnings, but with notes like "Here there be leviathans," metaphorical, and "Sing a low sea to calm the ripples." It's a living map, Captain Sharma said, taking over. It requires a navigator, not a computer. A human mind, trained to see the patterns, to hear the music. We cannot give you an algorithm to cross the veil. But we can offer you pilots. We can offer you the path. The chamber digested this. The Concorde, a society built on solid verifiable knowledge, was being offered a mystery. A path that depended not on machinery, but on instinct. On art. Chorus Kalen finally spoke. He looked aged. The calm certainty of millennia had been washed from his bronze feathers. You ask us to trust, a feeling, a superstition. To send our ships, our people, into that, guided by a metaphor. Anya Sharma met his gaze. You trusted the theorem. The theorem said it was impossible. We are here. The map is real. The choice is yours. You can cling to the old map, with its clear edges and its comforting impassable label. Or you can admit that the universe is bigger, stranger, and more beautiful than your theorems allowed, and come see what's on the other side. The silence that followed was the most profound in the chamber's history. Vri broke it. She stood, all four arms open in a Kthari gesture of formal proposition. The Mercurial Consortium, my family's trade house, formally petitions the Council. We wish to contract with the Human Navigators Guild for transit through the Veil. We will provide the ship. They will provide the path. It was the crack in the dam. One by one, others followed. Not all. The Xylosians abstained, retreating to recalculate their understanding of reality. But the Gel-Lent, the Serene, the Kthari, they chose the new map. 1 standard year later. Observation Prime has been redesignated Gateway Prime. It is no longer a sterile watching post. It is a bustling, chaotic, vibrant port. The elegant Xylosian architecture is now draped with Gel-Lent industrial gantries, serene kinetic sculptures that move with the Veil's rhythm, and human-built navigation beacons that pulse with warm yellow light. A new class of ship is being built, Veil Clippers. Hybrid designs, with Concorde durability and human-inspired fluid control systems. And in the command chair of every one that attempts the crossing, sits a human navigator. Ilara Vance is the first master navigator. She trains others, teaching them not just math, but how to listen, how to feel. She sits with young serene pilots and has them describe the storm as a symphony. She has gel-lent engineers build engines that can hum on command. Vria's ship, the Mercurial Prophet, now bears a new mural beside its Kthari sigils, a human sailing ship, identical to the one on the Daring Leap. It has made 3 successful transits, each time with Ilara in the co-pilot seat. Their profit margins are the stuff of legend. On the bridge of a new clipper, the Dauntless Song, prepared for its maiden voyage, Chorus Kalen stands beside Ilara. He is no longer commander here. He is an observer, a student. The veil churns before them, as terrible and magnificent as ever. Are you not afraid? Kalen asks, the old fear still in his song voice. Always, Ilara says, her hands resting lightly on the navigational harp, an interface of her own design that translates stellar data into tactile vibrations. But fear is just the first note. You have to listen past it to hear the rest of the song. She closes her eyes. Not looking at the screens, not reading the data. She is listening. To the subharmonic rumble of the grandfather's pulse. To the whispering sigh of the magnetic tides. She feels it in her bones, in the memory of her grandmother's stories of the sea. Her fingers pluck the strings of the harp. A soft, complex chord resonates through the ship. Helm, she says, her voice a calm melody in the tension. Take us in. Bearing 370 by the maiden's sigh. And mind the step. It's a doozy. The Dauntless Song eases forward, not as a conqueror charging a gate, but as a guest entering a grand, chaotic, and magnificent hall. It slips into the storm, and the storm, as if recognizing an old friend, parts just enough to let it pass. From the observation deck of Gateway Prime, Prime Calculus watches the ship vanish. Its crystalline form is no longer pulsing with agitated colors. It holds a steady, contemplative silver. It is processing not data, but a concept. For 12,000 years, the galaxy believed the universe was a library, to be read and catalogued. Humanity arrived and showed them it was an ocean. Vast, deep, terrifying, and beautiful. You couldn't just read an ocean. You had to sail it. You had to respect its moods, ride its currents, and sometimes, sing to its depths to find your way home. The veil still stands. It is still impassable to those who see only a wall. But for those who learn to listen, it is a door. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. Not to be the strongest or the smartest, but to be the ones who would hear music in the maelstrom and dance.